cannot do much more. So first thing, I'm going to apologize. I'm going to skip some slides because of the change in a timeline, so I will not say everything that I planned. As you heard already, we are going to talk a little bit a different topic on doctoral education that it has to be up to now, but at the same time, I think if we say that it's very much linked to research and research evaluation, you would agree. One way that we can define doctoral education using different wording, we can say it's a training for research by doing research. And this, I think, it's enough kind of introduction why we have it within this conference as well. So I'm going to cover a little bit different topics. As you are going to see it, my colleagues will talk a little bit more concretely about particular situations and how it's done in the particular institutions. My colleague from Spain will talk about her personal experience as a doctoral candidate, so very different perspective. And I'm going to try to give you some kind of overview what is happening with doctoral education from the European perspective, but as well as the global perspective. Personally, I was very much involved in evaluation of different doctoral programs in Europe and worldwide. I was also doing work as a consultant and developing the materials in China, in East Asia, in Africa, across Europe. And on the other side, I have experience, as you can see, you saw it from my title, I was chairing a European Council for Doctoral Education for quite a number of years, and this gave me quite a bit of overview of what is happening in Europe, but also globally. So when we think what is happening and what we did in last decade or more in Europe, but also if you look what is happening across the world, we can say many things has changed, many things has been done in the area of doctoral education, and there is a definitely high level of convergence what has been doing at different universities and different institutions, but at the same time we can say many things need to be done still. So I mean, it's far away that we can say the puzzle is, all the pieces are put together in a proper way. And if you go from one institution to another, regardless which perspective you're taking, European, particular parts of the world, you can see, yes, some improvements or some changes or many things have been done, but then you can again identify what is missing still or what it should be put in the focus. So if you look in some kind of milestones in Europe, I put it here, timeline with, let's say, some kind of dynamics of the relevant documents that we have been published or issued. And you can see there is some kind of dynamics. Every 5 years we publish something new, which means actually that in between those periods of publishing relevant documents, and I would say anyone who is involved in doctoral education would refer to those documents this or that way, some implementation of the documents are put into place, and then again we would realize, okay, we're missing still something. There is, like, if you look what is happening at different universities, we need another perspective, we need another push to make sufficient changes. So if you look what has been done on a structural level, I put it here, we did a lot, you know, because if you look the number of universities, just for as a piece of information, Council for Doctoral Education has about 250 members right now. European University of Association has about 900 members. When we say 250 members, we speak more or less of all the best research universities across Europe. So it's like everything that we publish, everything that we discussed, all the activities we had, it actually came out from interaction of the universities who are really deeply involved in research, and this is one of the main features that I have. So on one side, we developed common policies and the documents. On the other side, we can say that we have some kind of framework for doctoral education, although I think it's important to say that doctoral education in Europe is still very much different if you look at the different institutions. So we don't have one model, and we don't say one model is the best, but we say there are different ways of achieving a good quality of doctoral education. And then, of course, one of the big steps or the big parts of the reform that has been taken place last decade or so, it was actually establishing of doctoral schools. Again, you know from your own experience that some parts of Europe or some universities used to have a doctoral schools, and there are long history of them, but at the same time, in the majority or some other parts of Europe, doctoral schools is a completely new concept, how to organize doctoral education. So one of the features of what we can say, you know, what we shared is like, and I think that this has been already said many times yesterday and today, when you're doing research, you need to share experience, and this is exactly what we did with all those activities. It is extremely relevant to have some kind of open communication among universities and different kinds of institutions. Networking is crucial. If you don't have a network, you don't have a good research, you don't have a good doctoral education, and of course, lots of sharing of experiences and learning from each other. So one of the things that I'd like that you kind of pay attention and have information, like we talk about the doctoral schools, you can see how the doctoral schools establishment has been changing over time. And here you have a data, I think the last one is 2013, and nowadays we even have a more doctoral education fitted into system of doctoral schools. More than 90% of doctoral education in Europe is within the doctoral schools. Again, if you look what kind of doctoral schools we have, so what is the basis of to structure them, you will see it again, it's quite different. So you can have something what we can say umbrella doctoral school, one per institution, and you can go down to individual departments or individual programs. So again, it depends how the institution decides, but some things are common to all doctoral schools. So we can ask ourselves, okay, what is a good doctorate? I already said we have so many different formats, we have so many different schools, we do not have one unified model, so we can still ask ourselves, if we want to evaluate doctoral school, what is a good doctorate or a good doctoral system? One of the things that we have to keep in mind that we have a very many different stakeholders, and each stakeholder has a little bit different definition what is a good doctorate. And then again, if we remind ourselves what we've been listening yesterday and today, we could hear the different arguments are coming from different stakeholders, and each stakeholder has some kind of little bit different focuses, although we are all talking about the same thing. And each stakeholder puts a little bit of different advantages or limitations on what they want to achieve in a good doctoral system. But still, I think we can agree, and in particular if we talk about research, that good doctorate promotes education actually through independent research, which is very important. Ethical issues is another thing, and again, today we already mentioned, if we push too much for too much of publishing in a too short time, we can kind of slip in a danger of producing fabricated results or plagiarism or anything like this. So, I mean, ethical standards are a crucial issue and a topic within the talking about doctoral education. Another thing is that we need to have appropriate research environment. When we say appropriate, we think about research facilities, research infrastructure, and of course, again, human resources. So if we don't have this triangle, then it's very hard to have a good quality doctoral education. And of course, on the other side, we have to respect individual interests of each particular doctoral candidate, which means that we cannot make some kind of unified scheme that fits to everyone. We still have to be flexible enough in organizing doctoral education. And finally, I think we also have to be sensitive what kind of translation of knowledge could be put into society outside university and what kind of career paths those young researchers can have or take once when they complete their doctoral degree. So it's like we all can also ask ourselves what are the key issues, and in a way, how we can achieve these good doctoral programs or good doctoral education. And as you can see, there are many things. And I would say for every single entry that I put it here on the slide, we can have a presentation for itself. So on one side, selection of the best students is the best thing. And it's not enough just to look in their records or something like this. So there are very different ways how to achieve this best selection. It is extremely crucial, the relationship that doctoral candidates establish with the supervisor. Again, lots of things need to be taken care of talking about this relationship. Of course, defining the research topic itself and what is a really relevant research topic, again, is not an easy thing, and it's very different across different disciplines. Developing proper trajectory, which means to monitor what is going on during the doctoral education. And then if we get more on the personal level of a doctoral candidate, it's extremely important that he is or she is not isolated, that there is some kind of micro environment which supports everything that is done during the doctoral education, and to have possibility to share experiences both with younger colleagues and senior colleagues as well. So what are the components for the evaluation? Many of them. Somehow they're also reflecting what I've been already saying, but one thing is, and as a starting thing, and the most relevant, I guess, for this conference is the research productivity and outcome. I would like to remind you that some good universities claim that up to 75% of institutional research output is related somehow to doctoral candidates' research work. So there are co-authorship papers, there are those who are working actually on research, and there are significant contributors of institutional research. Career prospects, this is another thing. Let's remind ourselves that we have a very different figures across Europe, but also across the world, how many of those young talents who get their PhD degree stay within the system of academia or research institutions, and how many of them go outside academia. It goes between 10% staying within academia and research institutions and 90% leaving it, and vice versa, that you have sometimes only 10% leaving academia and 90% staying within research institutions. Of course, many factors are influencing this kind of distribution. Development, need for new staff members, development of society in general, so I mean, yeah, many of things. Duration of doctoral study. This is another key element when we make evaluation. What does it mean? You know, how long, what is a good efficiency of pursuing good quality doctoral education? Again, in Europe, mostly we talk about 3 years, 4 years. Sometimes we move it up to 5 years, 4.5. But if we could agree that 4 years is more or less an optimal time duration of a doctoral program. Again, universities are claiming that if you have, very often you can hear, if you have completion rate less by 70%, someone will say less than 65%, this is a really sign that something is going very wrongly, or that this kind of programs need to be closed down. So I mean, there are different arguments, different figures, but again, the completion rate and duration is something to be taken care of. Another perspective relevant for evaluation is also what kind of new acquired skills doctoral candidates get, because it is not only research per se. There are many other things. If they want to pursue different careers, they will also need a different skills, and it's a question how we offer them those skills, how they can master those skills, and this is another topic to be discussed. So if we want to have this kind of indicators of a good quality doctoral education, what do we need to look on the institutional level? The first thing is research capacity. And as I already said, research capacity is both, or 3 times, it's an infrastructure including facilities and equipment, and it's also, and it's also human resources. Research-based doctoral programs, the completion rate, research outcome, and this varies very much across universities in terms of internationalization and employability. I will skip all this, but I will say, you know, how many students, doctoral students we have. I would say in Europe we have at the moment 600,000 students. The completion rate is 150,000 per year. And we still struggle, you know, do we have enough of them, or do we have, or we need more of them. So again, it's an issue to do it. And it's, of course, is linked to the capacity and needs of the society. I will skip this as well, but I will go to satisfaction with procedures. These are the results from a big study, including the best universities, and I just want you to look in the columns and to see that the least satisfaction, and remember we are talking about many good research universities, is still with the supervision. So supervision is still the weakest link in the process. So we have to be careful when we make evaluation process, that we have to think, you know, who are the supervisors and who can be the supervisors. It's very hard to have a supervisor who is not active researcher. That person has a capacity to have a doctoral student, the time to allocate to work with that. It has international exposure. It is very hard to be a supervisor nowadays and not to have international exposure and to give or provide a good quality supervision and research conditions. And of course, you know, there are other personal things that needs to be taken care. I'm really sorry, but okay, nowadays I think that research will be very different for generations that are coming. Universities and individual researchers will be taking very different, they will work in very different conditions, And we have to also be aware of this, that educating or preparing young generations for research tomorrow, we have to be aware of those changes that will take place. So just some of those new challenges. Ethics is becoming a hot issue because of many different conditions and the way that research is done. Just an example is the big data issue, how to handle them, what does it mean. Digital challenges are also something that could raise different issues, globalization, and of course talk with different stakeholders, those mostly coming from different sectors outside university, and universities, as much as they talk about this, as much as many universities did make changes, it's still a big issue. It's still a question how to make those communicational channels more effective. And I will say thank you very much. This was really running through my slides, but I would still like to say this is just a picture of my own university, which is a big institution having 600 to 800 on average new doctorates per each year. But what I think it's important not to have the traditional ceremony. This is just the kind of the end of the game. Universities really need to modernize their doctoral education. And what I like also to stress, it doesn't mean that doctoral education was not good some years ago. It means that the context changed, that university needs to change their way of doing doctoral education, and that becoming a new doctor is more having a good doctoral thesis, that it actually brings many other features or merits besides making a good doctoral thesis, which could be whatever kind, monography or selection of papers or anything like this. Thank you very much.